Hey, Matt,
Hey, Mike.
let's do a podcast
Right now?
right now.
Okay.
Welcome to Hacking the Grepson. You just heard some awesome intro music. Hope you enjoyed that. Of course you did. It was amazing. My name is Mike, and I'm here with Matt, and this is a podcast about programming and development and things adjacent to that. One of the things that I have been introduced to recently, since I just switched jobs a few months ago, is the concept of a code review. Now, that's not to say that in my past career that I've never had someone else look at my code or presented my code to other people on a team, but there was definitely no formalized anything about it. You know, it was very sporadic and it was very casual. What I now do regularly is someone on my team will make some changes to the code base. They'll create a pull request on GitHub and they'll say, "Hey, Mike, can you review this code?" And so I'll go to GitHub's interface and there'll be a bunch of files to look at and, you know, what it looked like before and what it looks like now. And, you know, my understanding is that the basic idea is, you know, it's sort of like a proofread. If someone was writing something and they needed you to look it over to make sure they didn't make any obvious errors, like, you know, if they made a typo or if they, you know, put some formatting that was a little odd, or, you know, to really get into it, like looking at how they implemented something and does that make sense to you? You know, just to have another pair of eyes on it.
Well, I think it's that last use case where it actually starts to fall apart. But finish your thought. But I want to come back to that specific.
Yeah, I think the majority of the value of the code review was the first two things I said, is to look for typos and to look for general coding style to make sure that it matches with the code base and you're thinking about how you would, you know, structure
And like,
something.
you know, is your code understandable? If not, like, you know, calling people out like, "Hey, we really need a comment here. Like the code's hard to read." And I think like viewing it as proofreading and like as like if I was editing. If someone gave me an email before they sent it out and said, "Matt, can you give this a quick once over?" I'm not going to reformat the entire email, but I am going to like add a comma here or there, or I'll be like, "This word is the wrong word choice." Code reviews from that perspective make a lot of sense to me, especially if you are not confident in your own code, or if you're like, I am prone to mistakes. I know people that don't feel like they need their code reviewed ever. They're wrong, but but in general, you know, some people are really good at making no mistakes, or you have all your testing set up or whatever. But you know, if you want things and you know, there's linters and whatnot to enforce coding style things if you want. There's ways around needing them, but ultimately, I think the reviewing for clarity is always that's how I always come at it when I'm reviewing code.
Yeah, the issues that I have with it, as someone who has not really done it before and is not someone who is super confident in their coding ability, especially when it comes to being subject to someone else looking at it. Because as we've talked in previous episodes, if the code works and the program runs and does what you'd expect, how you wrote the code is not as important. You know, if I use 2 spaces or 4 spaces, or I put my braces here or there, like if it runs and there's no errors, then you did a good job at some level. So that's not really, I think, what the value of the code review is. Also, as you mentioned, the linting and all that stuff, all of our PRs, regardless of a code review, go through that stuff. And generally, I'm running a linter before I even commit something, and I'm running tests before I even do a pull request. So it's gone through some automated code quality assurance stuff before it even gets to another human being's eyes. So,
which is a relatively new thing in this field. That when I entered this field 20 years ago, that was not a thing. Automated tests, automated anything really wasn't a thing. And I worked for a defense contractor, so we were actually contractually mandated that every line of code had to be reviewed. And I can tell you that some people, definitely not myself, would at times just take home printed out copies of the code and just sign them to passed the check and didn't actually look at anything, just a cursory review. I certainly would never have done that.
Of course not.
And
we're professionals.
I will attest to that in a court of law if called out on it. But a lot of times code reviews, especially back 20-something years ago, were check marks. They were like something that like it is best practice to have your code reviewed. In a perfect world, someone should look at your code before you make anyone use it. It's just reasonable, just like you would have an editor for a book, right? What it ends up being now is more of a rubber stamp. People are like, yeah. Like if it becomes a mandatory thing, well, now I'm getting into the article that you sent me earlier. So I don't know if we want to talk about that yet, but I'll leave it up to you.
I mean, I think we're almost there. I think I just wanted to finish up by saying that when I first started doing code reviews, I mean, like I've been doing them for so long now, but like, the first time I was given this task, like it was on a code base that I was unfamiliar with. And so I was like, wait, am I supposed to be checking this to make sure that this works? Or just that, they didn't make a typo. But if they made a typo, the linter would have caught that, or the test would have caught that. So what is my value proposition here? But I think I've gotten to the point where, like you said, it's a best practice, and even the best programmers will sometimes make a little slight. They'll put code in that works, but like you said, that it may not match the style, or they may have used like a var when they should have used a const or a let or something like that. I mean, it still
works. Which again, the linter should be catching, but
right, it should be catching that, and so and I wasn't being sent them constantly, because I think if I was sent them constantly, that's what would have happened. Is it would have became a rubber stamp. I would have just another one. Yeah, it's fine. It passed through the thing. What But it is really to think of it like a proofreader, and like, okay, if I were writing this code, is this how I would have done it? And if it's close enough to that, then yeah. But if not, then you leave a little comment and you say, hey, why did you do it this way? I thought that we were doing it this, or I would have maybe done this. And what I've found is less the value that I'm adding as my code review for the new person to the team is the code reviews on my code are very useful, because obviously they've been in this code base for a lot longer, and they know that even though I'm putting in code that may work, they know that, we normally do that kind of thing this way, and we want the code to be consistent because it's easier to read, it's easier to suss out how things work if you're consistent and follow, dry and all those kinds of practices that it's about making a healthy, readable, extendable, upgradable, maintainable code base. It's not necessarily, it's not about reviewing your code to make sure that it's right. It's that it fits in. It's almost like a culture fit rather than a technical fit, because once again, that's why we had the linting and the testing. So
yeah, exactly. I thought you were going a slightly different way with that, but I actually agree with everything you just said. Where I thought you were going, which I also agree with, is when you're new on a team and you are added as a code review, I don't think that code review is for the person who wrote the code. I think it's for you at that point. I think a code review for a small-ish change in a new repo that you're not familiar with, it's a great way to start to understand that repository. So like when I have things that I've written in somewhat isolation, maybe they were like a thing that I wrote as like a hobby at work, or like it's just like a proof of concept, and then I want other people to start using them. I will start CCing them on the code reviews as like optional, because we don't have required code reviews necessarily. And that way they start to see and get familiar with the code. I'm like, this is a good introductory one. And the other place is what you were talking about. Hey, I have a new person. We just, summer is ending, so we're getting to the end of intern season. But I absolutely am code reviewing everything my intern writes. But why wouldn't I do that? I'm the mentor. That is literally my job, is to be able to give feedback on, hey, you don't know this code base as well as I do, right? So make sure there's nothing glaringly obvious, but then also as a more experienced developer, I might know of things that you don't. Or when I started at this job, I am not familiar with JavaScript, TypeScript as well. So I would do things sometimes and someone's like, oh, well, the right way to do this in TypeScript is to go, there's this Lodash library, go use that thing as an example, right? It's like, oh, that does make that simpler. So like, those are the places where code reviews have a lot of value. When they're required and they become rubber stamps, they are useless.
Yes.
And if anything, I think they detract from code quality in those situations.
And there's someone on the internet who might agree with you. There's a blog post that I saw by this raycast company. I actually have no idea what they make.
They make raycasts, obviously.
Yeah, they cast rays. But they have a blog post called "No Code Reviews by Default: How We Built an Engineering Culture Based on Trust that Allows Us to Move Incredibly Fast Without Requiring Code Reviews." And one of the things that jumped out at me immediately is this line where it says, 2 lines. Our goal is to dog food changes as quickly as possible. And dog food is one of those terms where it basically means you use the stuff that you're making. And then he says, for this, everybody works on the main branch. Now, I had to stop and take a beat after he wrote that, because at least in our code base, when we're on a team, nobody is writing to the main branch. Everybody is making branches, doing feature or bug fixes, and then doing pull requests that go through a code review and linting and testing, and then that gets pulled into the main branch. Whereas these raycast people are just, everybody is writing to the main branch with no required code review unless someone asks for it. How does that make you feel, Matt?
I don't like it. There's a time and a place for writing directly to the main branch. I had to deal with some of that last week. We had a tool that was being migrated to another system, and it really could not be tested in isolation. It had to go into the build system to do it, and it was really finicky stuff, and it needed really fast iteration, and it was an old code base that no one was actively working in besides me doing this migration. In that situation, it made sense from a fast iteration perspective to push directly to the main branch, right? I was saving myself steps. No one was going to be code reviewing it, and I was just going to merge the pull request immediately. Sure. That is an outlier. For your day-to-day coding, I don't think it's a good idea to push to the main branch. But it also depends on the size of your team and what you're working on and the size of the code base and so on and so forth. My main reason for not liking it, though, is all those automated checks and whatnot that I think are so critical. You can't enforce those as well. I mean, if you have a merge queue, you can, which is like, hey, effectively, it's a pull request without the pull request. It's like, hey, I have this code. I'm ready for this to go into master. And then you run things on it, and then it automatically merges. Effectively is what a merge queue is. But that's not standard practice. And unless if you have a small team working on a relatively small code base, you can get away with it. I've been there, but I generally think branches and pull requests are useful, if only for keeping your code in one place, your code changes, so that you can see them all. I don't want to push, but if you're making really small changes, there's a place, I guess.
I mean, I agree in theory, and as a solo developer, I definitely write to the main branch. But that's because it's just me, and if it fails, I can immediately fix it. And it doesn't necessarily go through all of the processes that, like, something I would do at work does.
And it doesn't screw anybody else up if you break it.
It screws up my own project, which I'm generally the one who cares the most about it, if not the only one, and so it's fine, because they list 3 things that code reviews and kind of by extension pull requests, basically this idea of like you have a main branch of code, and if you want to change it, you branch off and do your changes, and then if they're good, they get pulled back into the main branch, which is the actual code that's running in production. So these are the 3 things that they don't like about pull requests, and it's hard. Well, I'll read them first. Pull requests discourage trust. Pull requests don't prevent bugs. Pull requests slow down. Okay, now the first one, pull requests discourage trust. So this is coming at it from a viewpoint of like, okay, I don't trust the other people that are working on the code in this code base. Thus, I need a check on them before I let them come and play ball. Like they have to go through a training, i.e. a pull request or a code review before I let them come into the playground.
Right. And for mandatory code reviews, I can see that point. I don't know if I agree with it, but I understand where they're coming from. For mandatory code reviews, code reviews in general, no. Mandatory ones, you can make the argument that there's a lack of trust.
Yes. Well, and I think I think the issue here is that a pull request could be fixing a typo, or it could be implementing a feature.
Yeah.
Obviously, you want
huge difference.
Yeah. Well, and also one of the things that like I have an issue with, especially as a solo developer, is that I'll like start making a change, and I always think of, even though I never watched Malcolm in the Middle, there's one particular scene in an episode where the dad like notices that
I reference this all the time.
Yeah, it is like a light bulb is broken, so he like goes to find the light bulb, a replacement light bulb, but then he finds, I don't know, like a shelf that's...
Yeah, the shelf is loose, so he goes to get a screw, and it's like, oh, this drawer squeaks, so I need some oil. Oh, I'm out of oil. I need to go to I need to go to the store. The car sounds a little weird. And he's fixing the car, and Lois comes in. He's like, "Did you know the light bulb's out? What do you think I'm doing?" And he's like under the car, covered in grease. Yes. That is my life in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's a great visualization of the issue of trying to make a change to a code base. Is that, unless there is literally one issue with your code base and the rest of it's perfect, which is never going to happen, you're going to notice other things. And it's really hard not to fix all the things you notice once you start actually digging into it. And so what'll happen is that my change will start with the light bulb, but when I'm done, yeah, I will have also fixed the shelf and the car needs, oil and blah, 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 blah. And then my change is like 12 things. And yeah, they all need to be done, but they're not necessarily related. And if you want like a clean history of your project, that muddies it when you do stuff like that. And so, but my point is that could be a pull request, even though it probably shouldn't be. It should be multiple pull requests. Or it could just be, I fixed the light bulb. And, the amount of review that needs is wildly different. And so, yes, you could see that as like, ugh, I know what I'm doing. Let me fix the typo. I don't need to have someone look at the fact that I, fixed the spelling of this word.
Yeah. There's a level of confidence, right? And if you are an experienced enough developer, and honestly, that's the point of this article, right? In a lot of ways, is like, if you're an experienced enough developer and your team is experienced enough and you have enough trust with each other, you know when you need a code review, right? I recently, as part of that same migration that I was talking about earlier, had to do a pretty major refactor to one of our tools that I normally don't bother to get code reviews on because it's a fairly straightforward thing and who cares. But it was a big enough refactor that I sent it over to the only other person who knows anything about that repo at the company. And I was like, just make sure I didn't do something stupid. I'm fairly confident that this works. I tested it as well as I could. But can you just make sure that there's no glaring errors? And that is the most useful place. And that also, when I get a code review, I like to have that expectation set of like, here's what I'm trying to do to just make sure I didn't screw anything up. Because I'm always going to have suggestions on how you could write your code better. Because I'm extraordinarily opinionated. And I know this about me.
Yeah. The other one is pull requests don't prevent bugs, because reviewing code is hard. You can catch obvious mistakes, but you won't have consistent in-depth scrutiny. And that's a good corollary to your point when we were first talking about these, in that code reviews are more of a proofread and not necessarily does this work perfectly. Now, I will say there is another side to that, because one thing that we have in our system is that whenever someone makes a pull request, it automatically makes a new version of the website on like Netlify or something like that, so that you can see the code in action, which is very useful because you can see whether the stuff they wrote does the stuff that they intended it to do. I don't think every system necessarily has that. That's the first time I've ever had something that was that nice, and I love it. So it's very helpful for a code review, or just checking out new code at all.
A large part of my job is building those like nice automation things.
Thank you for that.
Make sure that flow is happening, because it is like if you have the infrastructure in place to properly test your code, like if there's actual unit tests and maybe even integration tests built in, then you have confidence that you didn't break anything. If you have linting, you're confident that you're following the form. Like there's all these things to build confidence that you don't need to have it code reviewed, right? And then there's situations where I need this code reviewed.
Yeah. And then kind of on top of that, pull requests slow down. Code reviews aren't high priority for engineers. They have to make time to clean up their review queue. In reality, PRs are an afterthought and not what you want to spend your time on as an engineer. I mean, sure. Does anybody really like editing or proofreading something else? I mean, some people do. That's a whole job, is to be an editor of books. So some people...
I don't know if I like it, but I get some satisfaction out of...
Yeah.
I get a lot of satisfaction out of finding mistakes other people made and correcting them.
So you love being a critic?
I don't know if I love it. I find it satisfying.
Yeah.
I find it satisfying if it's done in a way that is constructive, where I'm not like, haha, you made a mistake. But I'm like, maybe you don't know this thing. Like I will now tell you about this thing that you didn't know about before, and now you can do it better.
Yeah. So
which brings me, which reminds me, when we're done talking about this part, I have a thing that I think is more important than code reviews that I prefer instead, except for the cases that we're talking about here where it does make sense. You know, like, hey, I need a second pair of eyes on this because I'm not confident in my change. Right? That's a great place for code review, not great for the other thing. But we'll come back to that.
Yeah. I mean, just to kind of sum up the article, I mean, I don't think it's as, I don't think this article is being super one-sided. I think they are very aware that their company works a certain way. They have certain people. They have a flow. Code reviews don't provide the value that they're looking for as they're working on their product. And so they don't make them mandatory. They only make them, you have to ask for them. And I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think code review should be mandatory either, necessarily. I also just don't think there's like a hard and fast rule. I think they are a tool, much like the linting and the testing and the CI and the CD, and they have their value. And if they have value, you should use them.
It's situational.
Yeah, and I can totally understand that, like, they can slow things down, and if they're not providing that value and they're just being a detriment, then don't use them. But they're definitely not something to be discounted entirely. They definitely can be useful in all the ways that we talked about.
For sure.
Oh, so there was one note in here. I don't know if this is leading you to your point, but they have a side note in here where they use rebase instead of merge to keep a cleaner project history and eliminate unnecessary merge commits. Now, one thing we do at my job, they definitely are also big on the rebase, and so I've gotten into doing rebase. And I did read up on the differences between them and how the pros and cons. I don't know I don't know where I am 100% of my thing on it, but I don't mind the rebase. But it's mainly because I don't really look through our history that much, and
Thank you. Yes, that is also my argument against when you must rebase, like the people who come from like, I need my get history clean. No, you don't. You're not looking at that. It does make it easier to roll back change. Like if you need to remove a change, rebasing can make it easier. But there's this thing called squash and merge that is an option that I prefer. But
it takes more effort.
All the same benefits.
But it takes more effort.
No, it doesn't. It's actually easier for me. I click a button when I go to submit, and it says squash and merge, or I just make that my default on my projects.
Oh, see, I assumed when you were doing the squashing that you were doing like an interactive squashing, and so
the thing I like about rebasing, then? I use rebasing only if I made a major change to the code base and someone else made a minor change, because sometimes it's easier to overlay my stuff on top of theirs. Right? It's like the way I look at a rebase effectively is a git stash, right? Go hide all my code changes, like store them somewhere, a git pull, and then a git stash pop. Like go apply my changes. That's effectively a rebase. And the other way is, and a merge is kind of the opposite of that. It's like, hey, I already have these changes. Give me your new ones. Oh, there's some errors. I got to fix them up. And either of those are perfectly valid, and how you want to do them internally is fine. But when you go to push, as long as it's a single commit from your change, and that can be done as a rebase or it can be done as a merge. As long as you're doing the squash, I don't care.
Okay. Okay, but you did have something to say about code reviews or an alternative to code reviews. So hit me with that. So
one of the things that we talked about as being a something that code reviews can provide is the like, hey, you wrote this code this way, but I think it would be better if you wrote the code that way, right? The example I always have in my mind for this is I had a coworker who was someone who I had hired and led, and then eventually she was on a different team, but I was, we were peers at that point. And she wrote some code and sent it to me for feedback. And I was like, well, the way you structured your classes isn't good object-oriented programming design, right? Like you aren't, they're fine, but you effectively made namespaces and not classes, right? Which is the complaint I always have about the way people write code, write classes. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know why they're doing, right? But I gave her, I was like, I'm like, you don't need to change this, is always what I say at code reviews. I'm like, but for future reference, this class would have been better organized this way, right? And she actually retracted the pull request, fixed it, and resubmitted it because she liked my suggestion. But most of the time, that is not a thing that's ever going to happen because you're going to be like, hey, your code would be better if you wrote it this way. And people are like, I agree, but also I'm on a deadline, so no. And they submit it, and they maybe put in a to-do comment, and then that languishes there. But that kind of thing shouldn't be caught at code review time. It should be caught at design time. If you actually have a design discussion with people and you talk about, like, here's what I'm planning on doing, that's a great time for that conversation. Design reviews almost never happen in my experience. Like, I've been in this industry forever, feels like. And design reviews are so rare. The closest I ever see to it is brainstorming, right? People get together and like try to hash out what the thing will do. But the specific, like, I'm going to write this code this way, doesn't happen. And like I've been pushing for over a decade now to make design reviews like the thing that we are striving to do as people. And that's not going to be for bug fixes. That's for things like feature. I'm implementing a new feature. Where am I? Is it going in this service or that service or a new service? Is it a UI thing versus a back-end thing? How am I writing my classes? That's a conversation that should be had with another person before you start writing code, and it isn't. And I'm just as guilty of not having those conversations
I was
as
just
anyone
about
else
to
is.
say. Well, and also, why do you think it doesn't happen, and why do you think you're guilty of it?
I know why I'm guilty of it, and this is probably why it doesn't happen for some people. Other people, it's because they think they know better, I'm sure. For me, when I am writing code, I tend to need to get my hands dirty to understand what it is I'm going to do. So where I tend to fall in the design review thing is I will tend to make a prototype or like a proof of concept first, and then I will fix things inside of that. But having a code review of that is effectively a design review. Because this isn't the actual code I'm going to write. I might reuse some of it or whatever, but like this is just like this is the way it's going to flow through the system. And that's a great place for people to make comments. I think the other reason people don't do design reviews is because people don't do designs.
Ooh, hot take. But what do you mean by that?
So if you were in the room with me right now and you looked on my whiteboard, you would see the designs of 3 different things. One is a woodworking project I'm working on from, late last night. I sketched a bunch of stuff out on my whiteboard. Then I was like, oh, this is how this works. But you also would see 2 different views of a piece of re-architecting that we're doing at work, and I'm like, here's this idea I have, and here's some options for how we could start. Like, who I'm trying to do a division of responsibilities. I'm like, what things should be responsible for what, and so I sketched that out. But getting it off my whiteboard and into the hands of someone else for me, is always I'm not going to do that. I will take a picture of it and send that to them, but I don't like putting things into digital drawing programs. I find it frustrating because I'm very anal retentive, and I get wrapped around the axle on creating the images. But they're so useful, and people need them, and especially when you're younger and still learning. Yeah, they're just so necessary. But they're harder and harder to do because everything's always on a time crunch, and then you get to people like me who need to be writing the code in order to figure out what they want to design.
Well, is there also that we're all remote, and so we're not in a room at a board anymore?
That certainly doesn't help. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been working remotely now for 4 or 5 years now. And while I still love it and want to keep doing it, I'm definitely starting to notice some of the cons of it. Is that when I do actually go into a room with my coworkers, because I work remotely and I have gone in to see them, it's a completely different energy. It is. And the way that you talk about things is much more efficient. And I remember there was a whiteboard and people were writing stuff on a whiteboard. We weren't designing anything, but we were, it's just different. It's different. And I don't think it's fair to say that, remote work 100% all pros and you've lost nothing. You definitely, I'm glad that it exists and I'm glad that I can do it because the rest of my life is made much easier because of it. But there are definitely some things about work that go away, and the alternatives are not great. Like we were just talking amongst everybody on my team and the larger team about things that higher ups in management could do to help everybody since we're all remote. And the number one thing is always we need more kind of mixers where we actually talk to each other about just each other as human beings, hey, what's your deal? What do you like? What's going on in your life? And it's funny how that kind of stuff. I mean, we're talking about code reviews, which is ostensibly a technical skill where you're looking at code and analyzing it. But there's so much that's going on outside of that about who wrote the code. What's going on with them. How they think. How they write stuff. That informs all your reactions to those things.
You can also have much more casual conversations about it. If hey, I got that code review and I passed it, but hey, just so you know, I would probably restructure these. You can have candid conversations, I guess, easier. Yeah, there's 3 specific things I think are made worse by remote work. Otherwise, I'm probably the biggest proponent I can think of for remote work, and it is I don't have a whiteboard that I can share things. That experience of standing around a whiteboard, and I just love it. And every time I go up to the Bay Area to do work with my team, that's my favorite part. There are remote solutions. None of them are good. Another one is that casual, actually getting to know my coworkers as a human. Mm-hmm. That can be done. It requires more effort to do it when you're all remote, but it's doable. And I have one-on-ones with one of my coworkers every week where we just chat. We don't talk about work. It's we catch up on our lives because he and I have been working together the entire time I've been there, and we work the closest together. So I've become buddies. Awesome. And an actual friend at work. But we make a point of doing that to keep that connection. That helps with the trust.
Excellent point.
And then the third one was the other thing that you mentioned that I have forgotten.
Oh man.
You said something in your thing, and I was like, yeah, that's the other piece. You didn't say it. No, the thing you said was the casual thing. The third piece is something that is probably very unique to me. I am nosy as hell. So we had a puzzle table like a jigsaw puzzle table at my last job, where people would do jigsaw puzzles. Besides, like I have one here too, but I don't get this particular benefit of it. I would go over to the puzzle table when people were having their stand-ups, other teams were having their stand-ups that were near that, and I would listen in. As the lead architect, there was good reason for me to know what was going on, but I got sort of almost through osmosis, I was able to absorb what was going on, and that's the other piece of remote work that I don't like. And I know that's a bit of a tangent off of what we were talking about, but like those three things to me, I'm like that's what's missing that I can't quite get here. Every other thing I like better about working remote.
Agreed. Yeah, but I think the takeaway from your points is that building trust and that code reviews, because that was actually one of the points that this company didn't like about code reviews and pull requests, is that they discourage trust, because you're like, oh, well, you're working with people, you should trust them, you should trust their code. Why do I need to have you review them? And yeah, if you're working with them and you kind of know them as a person more than just a username that uploads text to a website that you look at, you're gonna trust it more, and that's helpful. And then, code reviews maybe are not needed as much, or they're not as required, as they were before. And it's a spectrum. It's never binary with any of this stuff. You can always improve all of the tools in different ways, and they can both help and hinder. So I agree with you 100% on all of those things about remote work, especially starting this job remote, whereas the job before I was in person and then went remote. Very different.
Same.
So many of the people on my team are just boxes on Zoom, and that's all. I mean, they may never be anything more than that, just because they're not like part of the project I'm on, and they're just kind of part of the larger organization. And that's kind of sad, because they all seem cool, and I would be perfectly fine with any of them to review my code. But yeah. So
when I was younger and had more free time, getting to know my coworkers more was nice. As an older person, I don't care anymore. That's not entirely true, but kind of true.
Yeah. Well, it's just it's as another one of my coworkers said, that socializing is part of the work, because I think a lot of people think that when you're socializing with people at work, that somehow you're not working, or you're not providing value or increasing. No, 100% untrue. Getting to know the people,
building trust and and shorthand communication that comes with that is so important to the actual job. And people don't. There's a lot of people who don't get that. But that's been true even when I was in person. There's people that didn't get that. They're like, I don't want to talk to my coworker. I'm just sit in my office all day.
Well, because
you'd think I would be that person, and oddly enough, I'm not.
Well, I'm glad you're not, because I think it's important. And the days of like the rock star guru coder who just comes in and just like magically creates amazing perfect code is, I'm not sure if that was ever true, but like that myth got built up. And I think in 2024 we've learned that no, programming, all technical stuff, all work really, but technical stuff specifically is a team job and a team skill, and you want to do this together. You don't want to be the guru that sits alone and pumps out the code and doesn't talk to anybody, because that's probably not healthy for you, and it's not healthy for the team. So yeah. So code reviews, they're good. Use them in moderation. It all depends.
Yeah. More useful for junior engineers than senior. Yes, but still useful.
Even the people at my job that have been working there forever, they still ask for code reviews, and they still that's still part of the workflow, and they recognize that getting another pair of eyes on something is always valuable, even if it's a small thing. So,
but being able to trust that your coworkers will have the personal insight, the introspection to know when they definitely need a code review and when they don't is tough, but that's again, like, different teams are going to have different abilities on that front. And if you're staffed with all senior people who've all been working together for a really long time, and they're on a small project and there's not very many of you, sure, don't code review. Any of those things aren't true, you probably want to have at least some code reviews.
Yeah. Well, and also the proof might be in the pudding. If you don't do the code reviews and you notice that code quality is going down and you're getting more bugs, et cetera, then maybe that's, a tell that you should
Well, and
change.
that's ultimately the point, right? Like all those automation tools that we were talking about earlier for like validating your code and giving you that confidence, those are really important. And then also being able to track how accurate that is, right? Getting that data of like, hey, you know what? We made all these changes and there was like one code review and it went fine, but we got bugs in all these others. If you can actually track that and you can make data-driven decisions, you can also make some smart choices around code reviews.
Yeah. All right. I think that sums up what Hacking the Grepson has to say about code reviews. If you would like to hear more of our discussions, you can go to hackingthegrepson.com. We try to put out an episode every other Wednesday. And until we talk at you again, we now return you to your regularly scheduled lives already in progress.
Bye.